Single men. What red flags made you rule out a second date? Story 1. I once ventured into the world of online dating. I had this one date with a girl who couldn't stop bragging about her fake ID. I was 23 at the time and she claimed to be 20. She boldly ordered wine and conveniently forgot her ID. To make matters worse, she treated the waitress rudely and even asked me to get her a drink. By the end of the date, I couldn't even be sure of her real age. Needless to say, I made a swift exit from that date. Then there was another date. I invited a girl to dinner and she showed up a whopping 45 minutes late, despite texting me multiple times to assure me she was on her way. What's more, she brought a friend along for protection. I rolled with it though. You see, there are some real oddballs out there, and I thought, why not have fun with different people? I ended up footing the bill for both of them because, well, I can be a bit naive. After dinner, the girl and her friend went out without inviting me, but she kept texting me, eager for more dates. I couldn't quite grasp how that was supposed to work, so I called it quits on that one. Next, I met a girl at a place she suggested. It was a cool spot, more like a dive bar with food than a traditional dinner place, but I'm all for dive bars. Turns out she was a regular there and knew everyone who worked there, so she felt right at home or something like that. We tried to leave and lo and behold, her car was dead. I managed to jump-start it, but not before noticing that her car was either her makeshift home or a storage unit. An old Cherokee with barely enough space for the driver. There was the girl who kept insisting that I was saying all the right things but hoped I wasn't into cruel behavior. I could brush it off the first time, but after the fourth or fifth mention, I was offended. I cut dinner short and wished her a good night, leaving more than enough cash for the hostess. I also dated a girl for about 3 weeks. On her first night at my place, she was eager to take things to the next level, but I wasn't quite ready. I told her so and she got rough and started questioning my manhood. It got pretty heated for a while. Eventually we talked things out, but she texted me the next day expressing disappointment. I felt like I dodged a bullet with her. She was great to talk to, except for the whole peer pressure thing. And then there was the teacher I dated for about 6 months. Everything seemed fine until she revealed she wanted me to roleplay in bed. That was a bit too much for me, and I couldn't look at her the same way after that. I also had a date with a girl who showed up several drinks ahead of me. She polished off a whole bottle of wine during dinner while I slipped on 2 beers. I offered to drive her home, but she jokingly accused me of trying to take advantage of her. I tried to get her a cab, but she refused, so I ended up driving home, feeling more like a babysitter than a date. And let's not forget the rest of the stereotypes I encountered. The ones looking for a free dinner, not over their ex-boyfriend, treating me like a side piece, claiming to be just looking for friends, projecting their fears onto me, being too desperate to date an engineer because of the paycheck, wanting to change me before even knowing me, being too cool for online dating, even though we met online, alcoholics, and I do enjoy a drink or two, and only seem to talk about their wild experiences. I went on so many dates at the same place that the hostess started keeping track. Sarah, the one I spoke with most often, could tell when things weren't going well. She eventually stepped out of her role and asked me to join her and her friends for a night out to introduce me to someone special. That's where I met one of her friends who eventually became my wife. Funny how things work out, isn't it? In fact, the restaurant's owner, who knew us well, played a big role in planning, hosting, and catering our entire wedding. Life has a funny way of bringing people together. This guy got a rude awakening when he realized that sometimes you meet your soulmate IRL when you least expect it. Story 2. I had quite an interesting experience, let me tell you. So it had been a few years since she'd been on a date and we decided to go for it. Dinner, movie, and we ended up in a hotel room. Seemed like things were going alright, but then she abruptly called it quits. No big deal, right? I tried to be a gentleman about it, called her a cab, walked her down, exchanged pleasantries, and thanked her for the evening. Then I headed back to the hotel room thinking I'd catch a flick to unwind. But here's where it gets bizarre. After about 5 minutes, my phone started blowing up with text messages. She was listing all the things I did wrong and claiming it was to make me a better date. I mean, come on, who does that? I politely replied that I wasn't exactly in the mood for a post-date debrief, but she just kept going. Message after message as if she couldn't stop herself. It was like she was fixated on pointing out every little flaw, and it started to feel deliberately hurtful. I finally had to ask her to stop messaging me, but she didn't quit. She continued with several more texts, seemingly oblivious to my request. Then, out of the blue, she mentioned that she'd be open to another date and wanted to know when I'd be calling to arrange it. Seriously, dude, what the heck was that?
Psst, guess what? This video is sponsored by none other than me and my awesome crew at Rufus Rugs. We're the masters of creating custom, hand-tufted rugs that truly capture who you are. Whether you're looking to turn one of our intriguing thumbnails into a rug, for purely academic reasons, of course, or you're eager to transform your room with some epic anime-inspired designs, we can get it done for you. These are all handmade by me and the team from Canada. No dropshipping BS here. Real, handmade custom rugs by me and my friends. Click the first link in the description to learn more.
Story 3. I've been on a lot of Tinder dates. When it comes to online dating, if a girl doesn't respond or doesn't make an effort to keep the conversation going, it's a pretty clear sign that she's just not interested. You see, with online dates, all you really have to go on are a few photos to decide if you want to meet someone in person, and a lack of engagement usually means they're not feeling it. However, I've also had some incredibly pleasant conversations with a few girls. It's not always about having a lot in common. There was this one girl who wasn't into video games at all, but when I talked about a game I played, she showed genuine interest. She even said she wanted to hear more about it, despite never having played video games herself. She was clearly into me because she was willing to engage in a topic I liked, and she even shared her opinions even though she wasn't familiar with the subject. On another occasion, I once had a date with a girl who had a Tinder bio that simply said, "I love animals." Great, I thought, I have something to start a conversation with. Here's how it went. "I saw you love animals. Do you have any pets?" Her. "Yes." Me. "Cool. What kind of pets?" Her. "2 dogs, 1 cat." Me. "I'd love to have dogs, but I live in a flat and I wouldn't want to make a dog's life harder. Plus, I'm not sure if I'm up for daily walks." Her. "That sucks." Me. "And how about your cat? Do they get along with the dogs or do they have their little battles?" Her. "No." Me. "Did you get them at the same time? I heard if a dog and a cat come into the house at the same time, they usually become friends because neither one establishes themselves as the house boss." Her. "I guess so." At that point, I quickly finished my drink and made up an excuse to leave. This girl had bragged on Tinder about her pets and how great they were, but she couldn't hold a 5-minute conversation about them. It was clear she wasn't into me, and she never bothered to ask if I had any pets or if I was a dog or cat person. When I didn't initiate conversation or ask her anything, she just sat there, hardly making eye contact. Dating is fun when it's fun, but when there's dead silence, you're like, man, I should have swiped left and stayed home playing video games. Story 4. Met up at a cafe, and right from the start, it was pretty clear that my height was throwing her off. We decided to go grab seats by the window, one of those long bar-like tables with seats lined up. But here's the thing. She acted like she wasn't with me, like she was embarrassed to be seen together in public. Now, I get it can take some time for people to adjust to something like this, but when it turns into shame or embarrassment, it's a whole different story. And it just makes me feel awful. Not exactly my idea of a good time, I have to make it clear that she knew about my height beforehand. I have dwarfism, so I'm a 4-foot-flat, tall grown man. We had plenty of conversations, including webcam chats. Seeing me on a screen and being right there in person are two different things, I get that, but it still took her aback. Now I've heard some people calling her all sorts of names in the comments like shallow or worse. I don't think that's entirely fair. I talked to her enough to know she was a nice person. Awkward situations like this can make even the most polite and pleasant ones act strangely or rudely sometimes. She was definitely rude, no doubt about it, but it wasn't entirely unexpected, sadly. I repeat, seeing someone on the screen versus being face-to-face for the first time can be quite a shock, even if you think you're prepared for it. Story 5. She didn't say anything. Sure, first dates can make anyone nervous, but this was on another level. We were both enrolled in a film class at school and decided to see a movie together, 50-50, which conveniently counted for extra credit. As the day approached, it became pretty clear that what started as a casual outing was quickly turning into a full-blown date. I decided to roll with it. We were both single after all, and I figured we could have a great time together, so I asked if she'd be up for grabbing dinner after the movie. Seemed like a perfect chance to chat and get to know each other better. She seemed excited about it, and I was genuinely looking forward to the night. When I picked her up, though, she was shockingly quiet. She was dressed to the nines for a simple date, and the nervousness was palpable. I did my best to break the ice, to keep the conversation going, but all I could manage to get out of her was a nervous chuckle, followed by a simple, "Yep." After the movie, I mustered up the courage to ask her if she still wanted to grab dinner. She said, "Absolutely," but then proceeded to watch me eat dinner while she stared at me. When I dropped her off at her place, she told me she had a really nice time and hoped we could hang out outside of class again. I agreed and we said our goodnights. She didn't say another word to me in class after that. Fast forward a year or so, I bumped into her at a party and couldn't resist asking what had really happened that night. She confessed that she was so incredibly anxious that she had no idea how to handle the situation or what to say. Turns out that was her very first date with a guy. It's a real shame because in class we got along quite well. However, I was so thrown off by the silence on our date that I didn't know how to approach her for the rest of the semester. I've heard through the grapevine that she's now a semi-professional golfer. It's been years since we last talked, but I genuinely hope she's doing well out there. Good luck remembering to say more than yep on your first date or you might get blocked. Dating is a minefield, but it's worth it if you find the right person. If you agree, give this video a like and hit subscribe. Story 6. I went on a great date with an amazing lawyer that a mutual acquaintance had introduced me to. She was a bit older, maybe in her late 20s or early 30s, but that didn't bother me at all. We decided to hit the beach, played some volleyball, and then headed to a local pub where we just clicked. Later in the evening, she suggested I come over to her place and I agreed. However, when I got there, I couldn't help but notice pictures of her with some other guy, hugging and licking all lovey-dovey. It was clear they had been in a relationship. I wasn't sure if she had recently broke up with him or if she was still actively involved with him, but she never mentioned it, and she acted like those framed photos weren't even there. I decided to explore other options, although I occasionally wonder if I'm the odd one for not directly asking her about the photos. I feel like it's more her responsibility to explain the situation, and it isn't really my place to pry into it. Story 7. I met up with a girl from my university for dinner, and the date took an interesting turn right from the start. She casually mentioned that she only ate with her hands because she considered herself a super taster who could detect the metals in utensils. Now, if we were having finger foods, that would have been fine. But the problem arose when she ate a salmon fillet and wild rice with her bare hands, resembling Gollum from Lord of the Rings more than a dinner date. What made it even more perplexing was that she didn't have any cultural reason to eat this way. She wasn't Filipino or of Asian descent, but according to her Facebook, she had German and Italian roots. I mean, come on, those cultures are pretty big on using forks. Now, if any of you think it's normal to eat rice with your hands and wouldn't be embarrassed in public if your date did so, I challenge you to watch a video and then report back. Trust me, this is a fairly accurate first-person account of the culinary adventure I was witnessing, and as if that wasn't enough, she had the habit of chewing her food with her mouth wide open. Always a cringeworthy moment for me. Misophonia is no joke, and smacking sounds are enough to make some people gag, but that guy could have at least given that girl a high five before he ran for the hills. Story 8. I arrived at her place and she casually mentioned that we needed to make a quick stop at a friend's house. As it turned out, it wasn't a social visit. She had an appointment to sell these hot oil diffusers and a ton of scented inserts. So there I was sitting in a stranger's house for a whole 90 minutes while they went through the fragrances. Talk about a unique first date experience. Afterward, she suggested going to dinner, but I politely asked her to drop me off at my car instead. I mean, she had a business to run, right? It didn't even make it through the first date. Just to clarify, this happened before the era of Uber and Lyft, so those weren't options. She was selling Scentsy, in case you were wondering. And I had no idea there was a subreddit for this, but it totally makes sense. I might swing by there sometime and share this story. Story 9. On my first date and only date with a girl I barely knew through some friends, I picked her up at her house. The moment she got in my car, I couldn't help but notice a rather unpleasant odor, like she had just taken a trip to the bathroom. We went to dinner, but I found myself hardly touching my food. I came up with a quick excuse to end the evening prematurely, dropped her off, and drove home with the windows down, even though it was the middle of winter. I shared this awkward experience with my best friend, and he responded with something like, "Wait, she still smelled during dinner and beyond? Jeez, she probably should have said something." My girlfriend once realized she smelled like cat litter all day because somehow a bit of it had dropped onto her cuff of her pant leg. She was mortified, especially since she just spent the day flying from Guadalajara to Maine. It got me thinking that if something smells bad, there's usually a reason behind it, like some dirt stuck somewhere, maybe on the bottom of their shoe. So from then on, I've lived by this rule. If it smells like a dumpster, there's some hidden dirt somewhere. Story 10. She conveniently forgot to mention that she had a boyfriend. Let me provide a bit more context. My suspicions were triggered when I glimpsed the background of her phone, displaying a picture of her kissing another man. When I inquired about the photo, she casually revealed that he was her boyfriend. Her excuse? Well, her boyfriend was apparently boring. When I pressed further and asked why she hadn't broken up with him, she had no answer. I confronted her, expressing my disapproval of her actions and stressing the importance of honesty with her boyfriend. The date ended shortly after this conversation. Just to clarify, this was a Tinder date, by the way. A friend later jokingly suggested that I should have clarified her relationship status before we met. You know, something like, "Are you single, or just mad at your boyfriend single?" And then, in this hypothetical scenario, she might have responded with, "I don't have a boyfriend, but I do know a guy who would be very mad to hear me say that." Lying on the first date? Now that's an instant deal breaker. Story 11. For me, it was a constant stream of talk about how awful her ex was. She spent a solid 30 minutes detailing her ex's seemingly idle life, glued to the Xbox from ages 18 to 27 while she was juggling 2 jobs and raising their 2 kids. After this lengthy exposition, she dedicated another 10 minutes explaining her new mission to find a man with a job and money, someone who would take care of her and her children. Needless to say, I left after that, having footed the bill for dinner and with a head full of unpleasant thoughts. In my experience, when someone can't stop venting about their ex, it's usually a sign that they dove back into the dating scene too soon. Unfortunately, I had to learn this lesson the hard way. And then it happened to me again last week. It felt like I was under scrutiny as if I were being compared to her ex to see if I was any better. She asked questions like, "John used to get baked and drive his car. You wouldn't do that, would you?" No, I wouldn't, but I'll definitely need to light up when I get home to try and erase this date from my memory. I went on a couple more dates with her after she claimed to have broken up with her boyfriend for cheating on her. Over time, I found myself falling for her. But then she ignored me for a whole week and texted me to say she'd gotten back together with her boyfriend. Life can truly surprise you sometimes. Story 22. I met this girl back in college and things were going pretty well. We hung out at school, got along, and I thought, why not ask her out for coffee? She agreed, and it seemed like a good start. So we're sipping coffee and having a nice chat, and the topic of substances came up because I wanted to know if she was okay with herbal relaxation. That's when things got a bit strange. She started telling me about her boyfriend who I had no idea even existed up to that point. Apparently he tried a certain substance once, and she described it as he turned into a wild beast in bed and then passed out. Not even 10 minutes later, in the same conversation, she casually dropped that she'd like to try it herself at least once. So the next day, I decided to be honest and let her know I wasn't interested in going out with her again. That's when the drama happened. She insisted we have this deep connection, said she was falling for me and begged me not to break her heart. Sorry, honey, but that's how you get ghosted. This dude dodged a bullet. His story tells us that if we dare to explore the dating game, we'll break free from the expectations versus reality trap. Hey, if you're into first and last date stories, you don't want to miss, what was your I'm out of here first date moment? Story 5 is a cringe fest. Check it out.